What if you had 35 properties that you were managing in a completely different area and it was all being run by a team overseas? Does that just give you anxiety? Well, that's exactly what Dan Kang is doing. He's going to show you exactly how you can do that in your business too. Hey, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley. Really excited to have Dan Kang on the show today. Dan is a good friend of mine. He actually was one of the first people to join our private Facebook group back in the day when it was a completely different look. But man, he became one of our coaches at one point, and he's a guy that I mastermind a lot with, and he has built an incredible business here in short-term rentals. He lives in Southern California, does most of his business in Houston, Texas, and has built something that really is just duplicatable and easy for people to be able to come in and out of his business without a whole lot of things changing. Now, he's going to mention something a few times in here, Breezeway, that he uses for his team management. If you go to the six-figure formula, if you have not been a member yet, you want to go check it out. There is a discount already to Breezeway that you can take advantage of. You just go to fearlesskyle.com/6FF. And as always, we always do these live in our six-figure formula group, our Facebook group online. That's the best place to interact with us so you can ask questions. And all of our members and podcast members are actually still in that group, so you can ask some questions afterward. And if you haven't gone and checked that out, you should, because that's just one of the amazing parts of the six-figure formula. So again, fearlesskyle.com/6FF. Without further ado, though, let's get to it right now with Dan Kang. Hey guys, welcome into the Fearless Investor Podcast. You're listening to me, Kyle Stanley. I've got Dan Kang on the show today, and Dan and I go back, and honestly should have had Dan on our show probably a good 2 years ago. But man, I'm glad that we've got you now. And Dan, thanks for jumping on, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So quickly before we get started here, you got an amazing story. You've got an amazing business, but I'm sure you've probably got an amazing guest story as well. What's the craziest, wildest, funniest, or weirdest short-term rental story that you have for our audience?
This happened 3 months ago. I stopped taking calls from or messaging my STR guests some time ago. But I got a call from the chief of police or a message that my assistant said, "You got to call this."
Uh-oh.
And I've never been so stressed regarding my business in some time. The short of it was, we had a person, our STR is in Texas, and Texas is, it's pretty, I don't want to, nothing about guns, but they, a lot of people pack guns. Even my property manager, women pack guns. And so this gentleman, this guest, had a gun, and he was doing something with one of our other neighbors, and the police got involved, and they were like, "We need to know what this is, who's there, blah, blah, blah." And anyways, it worked out. He had mental health issues. Nobody was hurt. And so as soon as you think you sort of have a handle on the business, anything can happen. And you just have to roll with it. So there's no playbook or process for that. You just deal with it.
Like you said, you just got to figure it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you haven't dealt with some sort of crime or violence in your Airbnb yet, you just haven't been doing it long enough.
Yep.
All right, Dan, before we jump into how you got started and why you're managing remotely and where you live and everything, do me a favor, just give everyone a little bit of an overview of your business. How many properties, where they're located? Do you own them, manage arbitrage? Just give me a little bit of a look through the lens of what your business looks like.
Sure. So I reside in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and our company owns all of our units, and they're predominantly in Texas, in the cities of San Antonio and Houston. We have a few rentals, long-term rentals in California, but in terms of STR, they're in Texas. So we have long-term rentals in Kansas, the Bay Area, and in Southern California, but the STR business is in Texas. We manage, somewhere between 52 to 58, so it's changing as we're selling or buying. Yeah, that's the makeup of our business in a nutshell.
You have over 50 now?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think the last we talked, you were at like 25. Does that include multifamily, or is that the number of doors or the number of properties that you have?
So I think when we were talking, those were just STR doors,
Oh, okay. Got it.
25. And so now we're at, let's say, 35. But
Okay.
then I never included just regular traditional long-term rentals.
Got it.
I just kind of put it all together because we do, but both LTRs and midterm STRs. Yeah.
And you own every single one of them.
Yes, our company, our LLCs own all of them. Yes.
That's awesome. Okay. So, and what is your full-time job? What are you doing when you're not doing STR?
I'm a W-2 employee. I work in the health sector. So I work for a large company, so my research, my background is I help people in the with research of sleep and health, people and businesses, and that's what I do. I have a degree, a graduate degree in science and health, and so that's what I do most of the time. And it kind of leads me into this: is how did we do it? And so I was in the armed forces, the military, and so we got stationed in many different parts of the country and in the world. And so I would just kind of fall into it. So I bought one property where I was stationed. Next station, I just bought another one. These are long term with the property manager, and I even bought one overseas when I was stationed overseas. So that's kind of how it started. Uh, and then, fast forward, third party property management, highs and lows of that. And, so you don't have time to do that. And then transitioning into the STR sometime around 2016, 2017.
That's awesome. I don't think I knew that you served. That's awesome. So you got into STRs around 2016, 2017, you said, but you're serving, you're doing the medical side of things, especially with helping people with sleep. But what exactly drew you to, I mean, seems like you were already doing a lot. What is it that drew you to short-term rentals at that time?
Yeah, so short-term rentals was an accident. So we were remotely flipping a property in Texas, and the market was a little stale. This was in 2016. It was kind of like that big bad 2008, 2010 period where the market plummeted, and it was still on the, it's kind of slowly recovering. And we said, we got to move this property. Let's stage it, get a professional stager and furnish it. And then I was like, okay, but then, someone mentioned Airbnb. I was like, well, the beds and mattresses and the vases and everything is there. So why don't I just hire an assistant to, put plates and pots, and let's just put it on Airbnb with iPhone photos, or I got professional photos from the stager. And people were coming through open house, and then we put it up, and like a lot of your guys, if you did it in 2016 with no experience, our month was booked, right?
Right.
And that paid. And then so we, on Sunday afternoons, we closed it. We had checkouts on Sunday, and we had people do open houses, and people were coming in. But typically when you do a flip, you could have a house sitting there for 2-3 months.
Yeah.
While you're paying for whatever expenses. And during those 2-3 months, it was great. And so finally at the end of 3 months, my realtor said, I gave him a small fee, and I was like, no, I'm just going to keep it because it's better just to hold it than flip it, And so that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. What was the income like that made you want to say, no, I'm holding this thing rather than flipping it?
Yeah. So let's say it was a typical Texas house. Let's say we bought it, rehabbed it for, at that time, 200, and we were going to sell it for, let's say 250. And so there's a margin minus fees about maybe 35, 40,000 after all is said and done, 35,000. It's not small, but it's not huge because it costs, 6 months to rehab.
Sure.
But the monthly income at that time was about 50, over 5,000 a month on a $200,000 investment. Uh, so yeah, that was great. Now that same house we have, it's not making over 5 to 6,000 anymore. It's less because the market's more saturated. But that's what started it. Yeah.
But are these properties owned outright, or do you have mortgages on them?
So what we do is we do something called a Burr strategy:
Yeah.
buy, rehab, refinance, and repeat. So what we'll do is I'll come in with a cash offer, and I'll have some tips about folks who are interested with a cash offer and ways to really get a good rate, and then or a good deal. And because cash offers are different than finance offers, there's certain tricks that you can do to get it a little more discounted. And then we would rehab it, and then we would basically do a number of loans, whether it's Fannie Freddie backed mortgage to a DSCR loan, which it's a different kind of business loan. But basically, you would rehab it, take the money out because your equity is high enough. So you buy it, rehab it, and then you can get up to 70% taken out. So you're taking all of the cash that you put in. And so about, I would say half of them are 2/3 of them are financed, and some of them we're going to, but we just haven't had a chance to refinance it just because of busyness.
So I want to make sure everyone understands what they just heard. And I know we've talked about the Burr method a little bit, and it's common enough because of Brandon Turner with Bigger Pockets. But the power of this, and I've done this strategy about 4 times myself. And the idea here, guys, right? You get in with a cash offer. It doesn't have to be your own money, right? Dan, was it your own money, or were you raising that money?
This was our own money, but I have done junior partnerships, so
Okay.
we've done both. Yeah.
Okay, so your own money or someone else's money, then you go in, you get it at a discount, you rehab it, it increases the value of the property, and then when you refinance, you get a certain percentage of that money back that can typically cover all of the costs. So if you spent, what did you say, Dan, $200,000, and that thing refinances for $300,000, you could get that $200,000 plus more back in your pocket. You've got a property that you own that
Correct.
really cost you no money, which is an amazing thing.
Right.
And so you've gone and done this. Are you saying you've done this 50 plus times, or some of them were not the Burr strategy?
I would say I've done it at least a dozen times. But not 50 plus. When I say doors, they're doors, but some of them are duplexes, and some of them are single family homes, that kind of. So I just say doors. That's 50. But
Yeah.
maybe in terms of structures, they're only like 30. So but in terms of, because you do the Burr on a building, right? So probably 10 to 12 times. And so the concept of, if you to not to belabor it, but to add on to what you're saying, Kyle, for the sake of other people who may be hearing this maybe for the first time, is, yeah, you buy it and you cause forced equity. So you buy it for, let's say, 100,000. You put in the sweat, or your team does, and it appraises for, let's say, 150, right? Or 175. Well, the banks will typically give you a loan to value of 70%. And so you would be able to get back that 100,000 plus a little bit. So you're making what we call an infinite rate of return, right? Because you put no money, cash into the deal, you've taken it all back out. And as long as your cash flow on your income stream is enough to cover the mortgage and taxes, and with hopefully a good cushion for cash flow, then yeah, you're making cash flow, you put no money in, and it's called the infinite rate of return. And people talk about stocks of 15, 12% is good right now, or not even losing money is good. But if you can make 200% return on your ROI, then they think you're a genius. But what if it's an infinite? Now, those are home runs, and sometimes you've lost, and I'll admit I lost money on deals too, because it's not every time. But that's the concept behind the Burr strategy, so that you can basically regain that capital and then repeat the process as soon as you get it back out.
Yeah. And the beauty of all this, yes, it's awesome for an infinite return, but also, I mean, if that, in that scenario, like you just mentioned, you put in 100,000 and it appraises for 175, you go and refinance it. You now have $75,000 of net worth, 175 minus 100 that you didn't have before. Like this, to me, the Burr strategy is one of the biggest net worth builders that you can do. And what a great benefit too, while you've got your full-time job. But what I want to go into now is more of the like nuts and bolts and the management side of this, right? So, when you were starting in Houston, correct me if I'm wrong, you said you were living there, or were you still living in Southern California at the time?
So I was actually overseas.
Yeah.
I was stationed in San Antonio very briefly.
Okay.
And I thought, hey, I like that market. I don't know why. The food was good. People were nice. So I said, I'm just going to buy a rental property right after I left. So I was overseas in another country, and I just had a regular property manager doing their thing. I paid 20% down and, all that. But, people said, don't do it. You got to be within an hour of your drive. And I was like, well, I can't. So how do I make it work? I'll just say this, fast forward 5 years with the advent of technology. I mean, if you read this book called The World is Flat by Friedman, we talked about how anywhere in the world you can do amazing things, which we're doing with Ring cameras and Wi-Fi's and Google's satellites and all that. But with that said, living 12 time zones away, and even 5 or being a 3-hour flight, forces you to make every decision where it's not reactive. So people say, that's bad, but I was like, in retrospect, that's the best thing that ever happened, because if a problem happened, I couldn't get into a car and drive over and fix it. And then, because if you do that repeatedly, you just are creating a job and you're just never creating a business or a system. So because it was far away, what that forces you to do is every time you get it, you're saying, I'm going to get this call again, right? So what do I do next time? I can't fly over there. So it's a fundamental shift is you have to create what I call an SOP. That's what I learned in the Army. It's called a standard operating procedure. Any military person will, like, you go in, they give you a stack of SOP, and it doesn't matter. And that's why if one military guy comes in, another, it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't rely on a person, it relies on a system. And so that was drilled into me. And I'm dispensable, because if you die in the battlefield, someone takes your place as long as they know the SOP, right? And but it takes a while to develop. So I created slowly through VAs, through technology, an SOP, standard operating system, so that I'm replaceable, but so is everyone on my team. So someone's sick, someone quits, someone has whatever, vacation, it should just move forward, right? That's what a true business does, right? And because I was so far away, I had to think of it in that perspective, that I got to fix this problem now, but I got to create an SOP for the next time, for that, so that my assistant will do it. And so over years, you just sort of slowly develop your SOP.
That's awesome. Okay. So if you're here live right now, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel later on, by the way, if you guys don't know, the best way to be able to interact with us in these is to be a part of the 6-figure formula. You can go check that out at fearlesskyle.com/6FF. If you're in the 6-figure formula listening to this live right now, what is one SOP that you have implemented in your business that you're like, doesn't matter if I'm overseas or right next door, it can get done because I have the right SOP in place, standard operating procedure? I think what I resonate with you on this, Dan, is I used to live at one of my Airbnbs. I lived in the mother-in-law unit when I was a bachelor, and that 3-bedroom, 2-bath in the front was being rented out. When I first moved in there, man, I would go in any excuse I had to go in there when a guest moved out, because it was so close to me. And what I found myself doing, I'll go in there really quick before this meeting. Before I know it, 10 minutes later, I'm calling and canceling meetings because I'm like, I need to clean this place. The cleaner didn't do a good enough job. And I start doing all these things, right? That, like, it's such a menial task. It shouldn't be me, but we think because it's there, it's in front of us, and we're just go, get things done, that it has to be us. And so I love what you say there, because what I eventually had to tell my team was, even though I live right next door, do not call me to go in there. I'm not going to step foot in there, because I know as soon as I step foot in there, all of our SOPs go out the door, and I'm not using my team. So have you ever had moments though, where like you had to work against your instinct and say, no, I'm not going to go do this thing? Maybe you were in town visiting your properties too. I don't know. Anything like that ever happen?
I still do. I do
Yeah.
it. I did it this morning, and that's our human nature to have control. Like I'm doing it. So I just answered a message about how to do a maintenance, because we own, we have to do maintenance, and we use things like how to utilize home warranty for cheaper fixes. And I'll aside, but if you have a fourplex, home warranties are great because they just warranty the building, but they don't know that you have 4 units. You have one home warranty for 4 units. But anyways, so I would message a VA, it's like talking with something, and it's like, this is probably better. But what I should do, and I have to hold myself back to answer your question, is let my operations manager to do it and talk with him just twice a week, and just write it all down and have him implement my SOP and so on and so forth, like a real business, instead of me jumping in and talking to a VA. I have 5 or 6 VAs, so talking to one of them directly. So that's good. So yes, that is what we all want to do. And sometimes when you feel like your business is not working well, you feel like you got to jump in and start, or maybe you feel like, hey, you got to tell them, I'm still in here, I'm still watching everything,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But I think that's actually counterproductive when I do that.
Cool. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to read a couple of comments that some of our listeners have been throwing here for that question that I asked about their number one standard operating procedure. What is your number one standard operating procedure that you feel like has given you the most freedom from your business? And before you answer that, Ken says his is his cleaning process and communication with his team. And then another Dan here says a cleaning guide and a house manual that are standard for all properties. So those are good. Thanks, guys. What do you think, Dan? What's that number one that's giving you the most time freedom?
I would say one is I would say one that's helped us is, yes, we have a cleaning SOP and a guidebook and everything. But one is, we call it we use a task called Breezeway. And what we do is we have 3 things. And number one is we have what we call the backup system. So when a person goes in, the cleaner goes in, they look at everything and they strip the beds. But the reason why they rush is they want to get to the next job, or they want to get out of there. And so we force and we require every cleaner to have a backup set, blue taped with the signature, photographed with their name and date when they made it, so that the next cleaner, whether they're from turnover B&B, new cleaner, or any cleaner, will go in there and say, there's a backup set, and this person is responsible. And if they put a stained or dirty, or they didn't do it right, we know who it is, because what they do is they just take that apart, strip the beds, they put it on there, and all the beds are already made, just like that. And all the towels, linens, and done within 20 minutes. It's already done before they start cleaning. And all they're doing is now spending the rest of the 2 hours, or 2 hours, 2.5 hours cleaning. So we started implementing that one backup thing, and that had a sort of downward trickle effect to anyone who's in there. So anyone who comes in, they're like, they can get out quickly. But if you don't have a really good backup set, they're like, where is everything? I gotta wash this. And that's when the havoc starts. So that's helped our cleaning team immensely.
That's awesome. I feel like I want to ask the annoying typical question of what does your team look like, but I want to go a little bit deeper. Your team has something really unique about it, and in the fact of the way that you use your VAs. I know a lot of other people in their business that are using VAs for guest communication, but correct me if I'm wrong or if anything's changed. Your VAs pretty much run your entire business. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Can you dive in a little bit more on that? What does that look like?
Sure. I initially had a realtor here in Los Angeles help me, because I thought I needed someone local. And then I had a realtor in Texas. But at the end of the day, in order for me to put them on a full-time salary, I have to give them US wages, which is expensive for, has, whatever that is, even in Mississippi to San Francisco, it's going to be more expensive. And so just out of economic necessity, I thought, is there a better way? Because what happened was I would hire, let's say, a 20-hour-a-week person. Even if they were brilliant, they just couldn't do everything in 20 hours, And so the way I do it is, it's just, I'm not an economist, but you just looked at the GDP, gross capita income of the world, and you see all the rankings from 1 to 120, like Bahrain, and, it's up there, United Arab Emirates. But then you look and you go down to like 70 or 80 or 90, and you're like, there's these 3 countries, okay? South Africa, the Philippines, Pakistan, and India. And why I said that, because their GDP is low, and what that means is they don't need a lot of money to have a middle-class salary. So, for example, I had a person in Argentina or Latin America too, or Russia is in there. So you look at the GDP and you look to see what countries resonate with you. Maybe you're from Russia, or maybe you're from the Philippines, but where they also speak English. So that's that intersection. English, low GDP. That means you can pay them anywhere from $4 to $7 an hour, and that's still middle class income wages over there, right? So what I came up with is in certain countries you can pay them middle class wages, and I have them working full time. Actually, you can hire 3 or 4 people to match what a college educated person here, and they're all college educated, and a person working 40 hours here, I don't care if they went to Harvard, they cannot match 4 college educated people overseas. It's just not possible. So you just have much more brain power. And what I'm buying isn't just, do this, is I'm investing in brain power of problem solvers. And that's our core thing. We did a thing in your group, Kyle, a year ago with Traction. And one of the core principles for us is problem solvers, and your core principles is bring me solutions, not problems. But the idea is that identifying problems, problem solver, that's what I bring in. Because you could create an SOP, but you need problem solvers. And so I get smart problem solvers. We have an SOP, it has a rough template, and I just say, get to work. Nice. And so I'll give you one example. So I have an operations manager, and we have 4 or 5 VAs underneath him. I have a bookkeeper, etc.
And that operations manager is also a VA, or?
Correct.
Okay,
it's
cool.
also VA. He's in Russia,
okay.
And so I pay. So he oversees. So he oversees the meetings. He oversees the meetings with the cleaners. We have cameras. We have Breezeway that tracks when a cleaner entered the unit, when they left. I mean, we know when people come in and out. It's so it's just, he's just very professional, he's polite, his English is good. And so he runs the meetings, he communicates, he hires new cleaners, so we're, like literally he interviews them, he does a screening, and then he says, I think these are the best candidates. And then I'll do a Zoom to do the final okay, So he screens and he delegates, post this on ZipRecruiter or Indeed or Craigslist, he delegates all that. So he hires our staff, he runs the cleaning, all overseas. So my manager, my highest, so this is, people say, well, this is the concept, the world is flat. My manager oversees my business and oversees my US team from another country.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. So that's your manager, which I agree. Like, my manager does not go to the properties. She, in fact, because of workman's comp, I tell her, you're not allowed to leave your house. As soon as you leave your house in California and go to one of the properties, now I have to pay way more taxes on workman's comp for you. So I totally 100% agree with you that the manager does not have to be local. But what about, the inspections and making sure the properties are still in good condition? Are you just relying on the cleaners, or is there another person in your team?
I think 2 things. So when we do the Breezeway app, it's this third-party app that you can take photos and maintenance. And so we have maintenance people who come. We have one in-house maintenance who helps with that. But because we have 3 or 4 cleaners that are rotating, it's not one person. So we purposely have the system where we have a home base where one cleaner near their home, they're doing 70% of the cleanings. And this cleaner over here, they're doing 70% of cleanings. And then we rotate them. So this causes transparency and honesty. Like if they're not doing the cleaning in the back of right, the other cleaners are going to report that, right? And then so there's the photos. It's like, hey, the dust in the ceiling fan that hasn't been cleaned for months.
Yeah.
So the other cleaner is going to report it on this cleaner, right? And the vent, AC vents. So here are the 4 things: behind the stove, the window sills, the ceiling vents, the fans, and the AC vents. Those are they always get missed, right? In the front and back porch.
Yeah.
They're just reporting it. And so now we just have a checklist. So yes, cleaners will do 80% because they're reporting it. And then finally, the all-powerful guest review. And we'll actually follow up. If they give us 5S, we say, hey, we'll give you $10. Or we'll say, can you comment anything about the cleaning or in this? So we give them would love to. We're going to give it to them anyway. Here's $20 for a future stay for direct booking. But could you give us any comment on the cleaning? And so we have more stuff. And then I have one VA who basically puts that into Breezeway and Excel or whatever and say, here's all the stuff that we have. And we close the unit down for a day, have our maintenance guy fix 5 or 6 things that day on that unit. And then you just kind of keep it going. And then so hopefully I answered that question.
So first of all, that's really cool to hear you, because we actually talked about that within our team of like, well, maybe the cleaners should be inspecting other cleaners, and we ended up just hiring an inspector instead of doing that. So it's great to hear the proof of concept of that still works. And that's the great thing about this business, right? Like no 2 businesses are the same in short-term rentals. I feel like every single person I talk to has a completely different look on their team. But if I'm understanding correctly, you've got your VAs, you've got your cleaners, you've got your typical handymen and people that need to do maintenance. Is there anyone else that we haven't mentioned that's on the team that's helping you do this remotely?
The guest they're the critical part of our team. That's the most critical. They take photos. We'll actually ask them, we'll message them privately because we don't want to, have them, throw us under the bus on Airbnb. So we'll just message them on Grasshopper or whatever, but texting. It's like, can you show us what you mean by hair? And they'll just like, yeah, boom, 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 boom. And then, or can you tell us what you mean by what's broken, or what you mean by a creaking door? And they're free and they give you awesome inspections. So we really utilize our guests. They're the most important part of our inspection team.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So the real question here is not cleaners, not handymen, just your VAs. How much of a monthly nut does that cost you?
So it depends on the city, but I'll give you mine. So my manager I'm not going to say lower, but non-manager, you could probably get one full. So if you get what I considered a very legit VA, college educated, they know about Airbnb because they work for Airbnb. I have one person who worked for Airbnb review disputes. The people who was like, hey, well, she and I had a previous one, they worked for me, and their main job is to take down reviews.
Yeah.
Right. But anyways, but that's one of her jobs. But so you may have to pay, depending on the country, somewhere between $6 to $10, whether it's South Africa, Philippines, Pakistan. And then for an entry level, what I do is I say for the countries that I target, somewhere between $3 to $4. I say the first month is the trial period, $3 flat rate. And after that, it goes up from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the managers will get a little more, of course. And then so I would say one VA, you could have, if you wanted to get one solid VA, you're paying full-time, 40 hours a week at $5 an hour. You do the math. And then if you have a set of 5, it's not $5 an hour for 5. It's one who's really good. Mm-hmm. And then you can hire, let's say 3 at 4, a cheaper rate. Does that make sense? And it does. Yeah. So it depends. If you have a lot of units, you're going to have more. And if you have, a few, you're going to have less. I would say, but before I say VA, I'll say this personally, Kyle, is when you're doing the VA, look at it as a time to grow your business. Meaning, growing your business is, you could call it growing in terms of expanding and getting numbers. What I mean by growing your business is growing it deep and creating an SOP, a true system, so that as you layer on additional units, or as you hire other people, they just come in, and we just, as a VA comes in, and you say, here's our Loom videos, and here's the tutorials from Logify or Hostfully. Look at that, and here's what you do. So we have a week of training, and then we have the other VAs training them for second week, and then third week there's actually a little training program for 4-week run up during that trial period. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, we decide whether we're going to keep them long term, or we make that decision. So I say invest in going deep and creating an SOP. Even if you hire a VA, you're like, okay, anytime there's something that you have to do more than twice, make an SOP. And then what I do is every few months, I look at all the SOPs, or now I have my VA do it, is update the SOP, because things change, right? And so I'm getting into the real grainy stuff of making SOP. So, in my profession, it's called see one, do one, teach one. So you see one, and then you do it after you learn it. But then the only way you really learn it is when you teach it. Okay. And so what I do is I have the new VA sometimes actually create a Loom video after they've done it 2 or 3 times. They will create the Loom video, but during that period, they will research what it is to, find an HVAC person, or how to use, home warranty, or use Best Buy extended warranty, or, all this, they'll create it. So the SOP is not just one time and it's stagnant. It's refreshed every, whatever, how long it needs to be as you have more people. So it's an organic sort of in time SOP that grows with your business.
That's good, man. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. We're getting to the end here. I think the big thing I just really want to point out to people. So the incomes that you just mentioned there, call it between, $5-6 an hour on average. That comes out to 40 hours a week. You're looking at $800 to $1,000 per VA. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. How many do you have on your team total?
I have right now 5.
Okay. So let's round that up. That's $5,000 a month, guys. All right. I'm just telling you right now what it costs me to run my team. And I have VAs as well, but I don't utilize them in the same way that Dan does for a number of different reasons we have to go into right now. But it's $15,000. Like Dan literally has a 6-figure income that I could tap into if I did my business the same way that Dan does. So whether you are looking to do this completely remotely, or do this in your backyard, or, have your own team, I think the bigger thing here is, A, it's possible to do this with people overseas, but B, if you don't have SOPs, if you don't have what Dan has been talking about, which is, a standard, let's call it company manual or playbook or company handbook, whatever, fill in whatever term you want to use. If you don't have that, then you really don't have the opportunity to say, hey, it's okay if you're sick. We've got someone else that can go in and do it. All they have to do is read from this SOP and go and fill in the gaps. And that's the difference to me between doing Airbnb or running a short-term rental business, right? A lot of people do Airbnb. They get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. They manage it themselves, and they never can envision how to go beyond 5 properties. It's the SOPs and treating it like a business that can get you to where Dan's at today, 35 properties that he's owned, that he's doing from another location. It's amazing what you've done. And I'm really happy that you've been here to be able to share that with people. So thanks for jumping on, Dan.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
Awesome. All right, Dan, any last words before we log off here?
No, I think we covered a lot. So no.
Is there any place that people can connect with you, Instagram or online or anything like that?
So for your folks, I am in that Facebook group, and I was just telling Kyle before, I'll check it about twice a week. And so I'm not always on there. I don't do Instagram. So Facebook, for the people in this group,
Yeah.
And more than, I think there were several people, like there was one guy that was group, and I forget his name. He was in Seattle. We messaged a few times, but I'm happy to interact there. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Guys, again, that's just fearlesskyle.com/6FF. And you can go check out the replay of this. You can check out all the course material we have, and you can connect with amazing people like Dan. That's awesome that you offer that up. And I know you've always been just that giving person, not expecting anything in return. So I appreciate you doing that. Dan, thanks for jumping on here and helping our audience to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We'll keep you here now for the live Q&A with our 6FF group. 5 VAs, $1,000 each. This is such an amazing business model. Now, I'll just give you a little bit more insight of why I don't do it this way. Me personally, I didn't even know VAs were a thing when I first started. And then when I got into VAs, I already had an in-person cleaning manager and a chief of operations, again, in person. And I am doing this business now at this point, not really for my own bottom line, but also for the betterment of others. I want to be able to impact others. So that COO and cleaning manager who do such a great job with me have shown so much loyalty to me that I want to show them that equal loyalty. But if I started my business today and I heard about this from Dan, I'd be like, dude, I'm doing it that way. Like, I am getting VAs right away. I'm finding them. I'm building SOPs, and I'm going to start that right now so that I can cut a bunch of my overhead. Personally, that's an amazing way that you can do this. And really, it's true. Aside from seeing properties in person, which again, your cleaners, or you could hire an inspector, even though Dan doesn't have one on his team, you can hire an inspector and have them do the inspections for you so that you or your team don't have to be taxed with, well, what is the condition of the property like? So those are the ways that if I were to do it, I probably would still have an inspector along with the cleaning team and the maintenance men. That's my 2 cents. But Dan has been an amazing influence to my business, and one of the reasons I did start using VAs. And I would definitely say to implement that into yours. That's going to do it now today for the Fearless Investor Podcast. We're helping you to conquer the world of short-term rentals. We will see you next time.